Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Now in this episode, we take a closer look at the South Caucasus. The United States is stepping up engagement with Azerbaijan and Armenia after Vice President JD Vance's visit. This is a region long seen as Russia's soft underbelly. But in recent years, Russia's grip on the region has been weakening. The Kremlin's full-scale war against Ukraine has isolated Moscow and pushed former close neighbors to diversify ties, trade routes, and security partnerships. To unpack the latest development in the region that has long been strategically vital for Russia, let's take a look at this next report.
U.S. Vice President JD Vance's trip to Armenia and Azerbaijan ended on Wednesday, marking Washington's most visible diplomatic push into the South Caucasus in years. Analysts consider the visit a signal that the United States intends to stay engaged after brokering last August's historic peace deal between the two former foes. In Armenia on Monday, Vance signed an agreement advancing talks on civil nuclear cooperation. Washington also pledged potential exports of advanced computer chips and surveillance drones, alongside infrastructure investment. On Tuesday in Azerbaijan, Vance signed a wide-range strategic partnership with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, covering energy, security, technology, and critical minerals. Aliyev described the agreement as an absolutely new phase in relations. Additionally, Vance announced plans to provide new U.S. patrol boats to help secure Azerbaijani territorial waters. On a broader scale, Washington has also sought to exert its influence by creating regional connectivity. The August 2025 peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan included the creation of the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, the so-called TRIPP. The TRIPP is a road and rail corridor linking mainland Azerbaijan to its Nakhchivan enclave through Armenian territory. In turn, the TRIPP aims to turn a former flashpoint into a transit hub backed by U.S. investment in logistics, customs systems, and infrastructure. The White House's messaging for the region is clear. Peace should deliver dividends. With Russia's influence in the region waning, Washington is tying diplomacy to trade, security, and technology, betting that economic interdependence can anchor long-term stability.
And now, let's zone in on the East planning portion of our show. When Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders walked into the White House on August 8th for President Trump's peace summit, the symbolism was hard to miss. For decades, Moscow, not Washington, was the indispensable power broker in the South Caucasus. Now, this time, Russia was nowhere near the table. Let's take a closer look at how the U.S. has expanded its influence in both Armenia and Azerbaijan.
The August 2025 peace deal included a 17-point framework signed by Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev to normalize relations after years of hostility. Just 2 years prior, Azerbaijan retook the Nagorno-Karabakh region, triggering the flight of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians. The U.S. brokering of the peace deal reflects the fact that both Baku and Yerevan have grown wary of Russia's ability to bring regional stability. While preoccupied on the Ukrainian front line, Moscow has notably reduced its political engagement with the neighboring South Caucasus states. The United States, meanwhile, sees strategic and commercial upside in investing in regional connectivity and security, but the framework remains fragile. For it to hold, Washington must deliver on its promised investments. If sustained, U.S. engagement could loosen Moscow's grip on its traditional backyard. If not, Russia will be waiting to step back in.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Vance's trip to Yerevan and then Baku is being presented as more than symbolic diplomacy. Washington wants a real political footprint in the South Caucasus. It also wants a bigger economic role. This comes as assumptions about Russia's dominance starts to crack. Now, the trip follows a US-brokered Armenia-Azerbaijan peace framework announced at the White House in August 2025. The United States is now pushing implementation. Russia tried to deal with this conflict for decades, but never delivered. There's also the Russia-led security angle. Armenia is a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, even if it has frozen its participation. Azerbaijan is not in the CSTO today. It did join the earlier Collective Security Treaty in the 1990s, but it left in 1999 and stayed out when the CSTO was later created. So in Armenia, the headline is energy and diversification. The US and Armenia completed negotiations on a 1-2-3 agreement on civil nuclear cooperation. Figures cited included up to $5 billion in initial US exports, plus $4 billion in longer-term fuel and maintenance contracts. Now, this does not mean Armenia picks an American reactor tomorrow. It does mean that Russia is no longer the default option. In Azerbaijan, the focus is security and long-term cooperation. Baku and Washington signed a strategic partnership charter covering economic and security cooperation. The document includes talks of defense sales and energy security, as well as US boats to help Azerbaijan protect its territorial waters. But there is a darker backdrop here as well. The visit triggered calls not to ignore repression, political prisoners, and a state of rights in Azerbaijan. The proposed Trump corridor is officially called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. It is described as a 43-kilometer road and rail link across southern Armenia. It would connect Azerbaijan to its exclave and head onwards to Turkey. Plans also mention rail development, oil and gas lines, and fiber optic cables. The core point is simple. It is pitched as an east to west route that bypasses Russia and Iran, and that is a big deal. See, this is where the Caspian Sea comes in. Russia's Caspian flotilla has long been described as the dominant naval force in the region. If new routes run around Russia, that kind of dominance matters a lot less. For the region, this is a response to the instability Moscow has exported since its 2022 invasion of Ukraine. For Putin, it is a visible strategic loss. In this part of the world, influence runs through infrastructure and choke points. It also runs through the ability to say no. See, this is the core of the story. Russia chose war and coercion. Others are building options that cut Russia out. Whether the United States push last will depend on delivery. It will also depend on whether Armenia and Azerbaijan keep the peace process on track. But for the Kremlin, the trend line is clear. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Mahammad Mammadov, a research fellow at the Topchubashov Center. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So today we're trying to break down this attempt at establishing the TRIPP corridor and taking a look at it from an economic, geopolitical aspect, as well as what it means for the region and for Russia. But before we start everything, can you help us understand whether or not this calculus is more strategic in a more geopolitical sense, or is there anything economically beneficial for the United States?
I think both of them is the case. The rationale is that after Venezuela, there was this conventional wisdom that then the Trump administration would go for something like a Yalta-style sphere of influence, dividing the world into spheres of influence with the likes of Russia and China. But I think James Vance's visit to the South Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan goes against that logic. So the United States right now is both geopolitically and economically engaged in the region. The major economic rationale is that the TRIPP corridor will give the United States a very big advantage to get access to Central Asia. Because right now, as part of its geopolitical competition with China over the critical raw materials, we know that the United States is highly dependent on China for both production and processing of those materials. Now, Washington wants to diversify its dependence away from China. So in that context, it's moving toward alternative regions, and Central Asia is one of them. So this TRIPP corridor, as part of the broader Trans-Caspian connectivity, will serve that purpose.
Right. And of course, the TRIPP corridor also aims to bypass Russia and Iran as well. And my question would be, how much would this inject American sphere of influence, and how much of that it could replace Russia's presence in the area?
I think in what's going on, the main loser is Russia, because it was actually the case just after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 that the transcontinental rail routes running through Russia lost some part of its importance, and the alternative corridors like the middle corridor running through Azerbaijan and Georgia gained importance. Right now, we are adding Armenia to that with TRIPP, and and it further will increase the importance of the Trans-Caspian connectivity for the intercontinental rail trade between China and the EU. So yeah, in that instance, in terms of economic sense, it will decrease both Armenia and Azerbaijan's, let's say, vulnerabilities to Russia, because both countries are to a certain extent dependent on Russian economy. So with this realization of this route, the first point is the intra-regional trade between Armenia and Azerbaijan and regional countries will grow. And at the same time, these South Caucasus region will emerge as a stable link between the EU and China. So in both cases, the regional countries will gain economically and decrease their vulnerability from Russia.
Right, like you mentioned, Armenia and Azerbaijan through TRIPP might reduce their reliance on the Russian economy as well. But for these countries, do you think it's more of a diversification tactic for them? Does the benefit come mostly from diversification, or is this route going to provide them an even better alternative, economically speaking, compared to the traditional Russian routes?
Yeah, in the new realities, both Armenia and Azerbaijan are openly declaring that they are pursuing multi-vector foreign policy. And as part of that, they are, of course, diversifying trade options, because as you know, both Armenia and Azerbaijan are land countries. They do not have that many options. And in that regard, especially Armenia is still highly dependent on Russia. And Azerbaijan, especially in an oil export sector, is to a certain extent, let's say, linked to Russian economy. So in that context, these countries are aware of this dependency. But what we have been seeing since 2022, and especially since last year, both Yerevan and Baku are trying to find alternative routes and partnership with alternative great powers. We can name China, European Union, and now United States. Both Baku and Yerevan signed strategic partnership agreement charter with the United States. So the key main target is to diversify their economy as part of broader diversification of their foreign policy in the new regional order, or you can call it disorder.
Right. And we're already seeing Azerbaijan, for example, having a more deteriorating relationship with Russia in the past couple of months. Actually, since the war began, there's already kind of a little bit of rift there. Do you think that the injection of an American trade route, a better alternative, would accelerate the divide?
Yeah, here the main point is that Azerbaijan seeks equality and respect from Russian side. As you know, for a long time since independence, Azerbaijan-Russia relations were mostly on pragmatic rails. And both countries were respecting each other's, let's say, interests in the region. But after 2024, the downing of the airlines, and we saw that the Russian side did not meet Azerbaijani side's expectations. So since that time, Azerbaijan is just showing that it will go as far as Russia respects its independent interests, regional interests. So in that regard, as long as we see that there is no reaction from Russia, Azerbaijan is independently pursuing new partnerships with alternative pathways, again, where Washington is very important. Again, this is a balanced foreign policy. And during the Biden administration, there were some weaknesses, some limitations in that direction. But now, with the Trump administration in power, we see that, especially after James Vance's visit, we see that Azerbaijan now has a very strong Western vector, which will be further strengthened after, I think, in the near future, signing of the strategic partnership agreement with the European Union.
Right, and I'm curious about what that means for Russia, where you already see their economy taking a hit since all the sanctions began bearing down, and recently we've also seen a dwindling of a Russian economy. Do you think that this TRIPP corridor, once established, is going to bring a further damage to the Russian economy substantial enough, or is it just like another alternative for the region that's a little, perhaps not that impactful?
Yeah, I think TRIPP is a very long-term project. Yeah, so there are a lot of still uncertainties that Armenia, Azerbaijan, through the facilitation of the United States, should clarify before making this route a full-fledged alternative to the Russian route. But we have to say that so long it keeps its aggression against Ukraine and keeps itself isolated, I'm sure that in the region the number of the corridors emerging as an alternative to the Russian route will increase. And and it can even decrease China's interest in using Russian territory as an access point to the European Union. So in that regard, yes, it's a negative to Russia's economy, but I think that the biggest damage will be done in the geopolitical sense, because on the one hand, Russia's relations with regional countries, except to a certain extent Georgia, is deteriorating, both Armenia and Azerbaijan. And at the same time, these two countries' strategic partnerships agreements with new, let's say, third powers in the region are increasing. And again, both Armenia and Azerbaijan are signing new defense and economic deals with the likes of China, United States, even India, and some Middle Eastern Gulf monarchies, and etc. So that's a negative for Russia's influence in the South Caucasus.
All right, so now the picture becomes clearer. This move perhaps is a bigger hit on Russia's geopolitical standing as opposed to economy. Now, you also mentioned JD Vance's visit, which is highlighted being the first time a U.S. Vice President actually visited Azerbaijan in person. Do you think that there's also some significant kind of signals there?
Definitely. I mean, on the level of vice president, last time Dick Cheney was here in 2008. Now, but never in Armenia. So, but this time the level of visit, because after Washington Declaration signed in August, there were some expectations, some speculations that, okay, Trump administration facilitated this because it was a low-hanging fruit, but the United States would not follow on, let's say, realization of the projects agreed in Washington. Because the logic was that the United States is busy elsewhere, whether it's in the Middle East, Far East, or in Europe, in Ukraine. But what James Vance's visit shows that, and the agreements the United States signed with Armenia and Azerbaijan as part of the realization of TRIPP project, again, the agreements first agreed in Washington. So it shows that the United States is committed to the realization of this project. And again, as the project is a very long-term one, and we have some unpredictability problems associated with the Trump administration, so it shows that there is a commitment, and the vice president's visit to the region shows that both Washington and Armenia and Azerbaijan has a political will to realize the projects agreed by the two sides.
Right, definitely an injection of confidence here. Now, I'm also curious about what that impact is going to have in Iran, because that's also one of the countries that this TRIPP corridor is trying to kind of circumvent, to go around. And do you think that's going to have a significant impact there as well?
Yeah, right now, I think Tehran is more busy in the Persian Gulf. That there is very uncertain situation going on with the United States and Israel, and there is this, again, deteriorating security dilemma that can very easily spiral into open confrontation. So I think that their focus lies more on the south rather than the north. But Tehran is very closely following the developments here, and some of the officials recently openly said that they are against American presence on their northern borders, and so they see it as part of the broader American and Israel attempts to encircle Iran and decrease its regional, let's say, influence. But at the same time, taking into account the recent protests, the deteriorating economy, and deteriorating geopolitical situation in the Middle East, I mean, from Iranian viewpoint, they do not have that, let's say, clout to react very openly to the developments in Armenia and Azerbaijan. So far, they are limiting themselves to some declarations, some comments, but there is no harsh reaction we have been seeing in 2022 or 2023 against Azerbaijan. So they are not good with what's happening with the TRIPP, but they are in waiting mode so far.
Right. Nevertheless, it does seem like this 43-kilometer corridor is going to have significant impact in the region. So thank you so much for helping us break all of this down. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thanks for having me.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Iran announced on Thursday that the country is open to international inspections to prove its nuclear program is peaceful. Now, this comes amid rising tensions with a major U.S. naval buildup in the region.
Marking the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, President Masoud Pezeshkian alleged that Iran is not seeking to acquire nuclear weapons. He also said that the Islamic regime is ready for any related verification. The White House maintains that its priority is to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. This comes following U.S.-Iran talks in Oman on February 6th, after which Washington imposed additional sanctions targeting Iran's oil sector.
A bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers introduced legislation on Wednesday to designate Russia's rebranded mercenary network as foreign terrorist organizations. This comes as the United States is seeking to tighten sanctions against Kremlin-linked proxy forces.
The Holding Accountable Russian Mercenaries Act 2.0, backed by both Republican and Democratic representatives, aims to expand Washington's authority to target successor entities that emerged after the 2023 death of Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. Following Wagner's failed mutiny and subsequent restructuring under Russia's defense ministry, the organization splintered into separate groups. Lawmakers argue that this rebranding allowed Moscow to sidestep existing terrorism designations and sanctions while maintaining operational continuity.
NATO on Thursday officially launched its Arctic Sentry mission to strengthen the alliance's military posture in the Arctic. This comes amid concerns of growing Russian and Chinese activity in the region.
Secretary General Mark Rutte said that the mission will consolidate NATO's Arctic activities under a single command structure. This aims to identify capability gaps and improve coordination. The initiative follows discussions between U.S. President Donald Trump and Rutte at the World Economic Forum last month, where both agreed NATO should expand its role in the Arctic, particularly around Greenland. Amid recent political tensions between Denmark and the United States over Greenland's future status, diplomats had previously suggested that a NATO-led mission could help diffuse strains within the alliance.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.